In today's video, I wanted to take a look at this FSR3 mod that essentially replaces DLSS 3 frame generation with FSR3 by utilizing the already established DLSS pipeline for games that support it. Now, unfortunately, this only works on Nvidia GPUs as of right now, and I wanted to check it out and see how it works in a few different games. And for me, it was kind of hit or miss. So let's dive into it and see what I mean. Now, if you want to download this mod for yourself, I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's on the Nexus Mods website. And what you want to do is you want to click on Files and then click on the very top file, download that. And that's what I'm using in this video. I won't go too far into the installation of this mod, but if you want a more in-depth look at this mod and some results, check out Daniel Owen's video. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. He goes into detail about the installation process. I'll just very quickly show how to mod this into a game. Essentially, I'm going to use a Game Pass game, a Plague Tale. So it'll be the same thing for Steam. You want to go to the directory of the game. So go to Manage, Files, and then Browse. And that'll bring up the directory of your install folder. So you're going to open up your mod folder and you're going to click on DLSS to FSR3 AMD is better. And then hold Control, click on nvngx.ll. Right click, copy, and then just paste them here. For the last step, we need to run the disable NVIDIA signature check, and that essentially modifies your Windows registry file. So do this at your own risk. You don't want to do this for online games, obviously, but this tricks NVIDIA to think that it's an RTX 4000 series GPU, essentially. You can also revert this back by running the last file there, and it'll revert the registry back to the way it was. Okay, that's it. I guess we may as well begin with a Plague Tale Requiem, which looks gorgeous, by the way. But anyway, let's look at the settings first. Okay, so we're going to begin with 1440p. As a matter of fact, we'll just look at 1440p for now. And I don't recall this resolution optimizer. I've set it to ultra quality. It's the highest you can go. There's no like turning it off. I don't think it's like a dynamic resolution scale type of feature because there's no setting of turning it off. So I just set it to ultra quality. We do have access to enable frame generation on and off, so the mod did work, okay, which is good. And then essentially I've just disabled motion blur, chromatic aberration, that sort of thing. And everything else is maxed out, including ray tracing. And we're getting around 90 FPS. Wow, that's almost 100 FPS. That's actually pretty good. It's much better than I remember it to be. Although, maybe I was playing the game at 4K. I forget. But point is that we're getting solid performance to begin with. I do see a bit of variation, like we're seeing a dip to the 70s, then back to 100, depending on where we look. But for the most part, our frame times and everything is pretty good. So why don't we try turning on frame generation and see if the motion fluidity improves at all. So we're getting around 70 to 80 FPS. And we're going to turn on frame generation without using DLSS. Okay. So frame generation is on. Okay. So we're at 137 frames. So it's definitely working. Now, how does the picture fluidity look? Honestly, it looks pretty good. There's maybe a little bit of hitching. I mostly notice it with that mountain, at the end of the mountain range, at the end of the bay there, when I move the camera around. It's almost like it's like hanging up. But, I mean, it's fine. It doesn't look bad. I mean, that could also be happening in the game. And then it's just translating to the generated frames as well, as that is what would normally happen. But yeah, I mean, I'd say for the most part, this is actually pretty good. I did notice a little bit of garbling on the caption. Look at where it said, "Where are you?" Yeah, I did notice that. There seems to be a little bit of an issue with the UI elements, but the world, it's actually not bad. Why don't I load a later save though, where there's a bit more going on than here? This is how far I've made it into the game, and other than the captioning, which is garbling up, it actually looks pretty good. The rendered world looks actually pretty good. Again, this is like very early. Okay, I think we might have crashed. Oh, That was like a big stutter. So I don't know what that was about. My biggest issue is, again, the UI elements. And again, this is a mod because I think AMD has a process of how they handle the UI. So obviously that's not being done here, which makes sense. Again, it's a mod, it's not fully representative. Like earlier in the beach scene, I'm essentially noticing the same thing where I'm basically keeping the joystick slightly to the right to pan the camera around, and it's not a fluid motion. Like I mentioned earlier, it could be that it's the actual base game doing that. So why don't we try turning frame generation off? There we go, we'll turn that off. And let's reset the frame rate counter. So if you guys see the 1% lows at 0, that happens because we're changing settings and stuff like that. It's not a really accurate measurement, but yeah, this is happening even with frame generation off. So it's being translated to frame generation. So it's not really frame generation's fault, basically. That's something you got to keep in mind, that if you're having performance issues or inconsistent frame times in any way, turning frame generation on is not going to fix that. It will translate into the generated frames in some way. But let's turn frame generation back on and kind of take a look at some of the other areas, take a look at the rats real quick and move on to the other game. But let's try to make our way over to the other side, maybe take a look at some rats. There's the rats. Oh, snap. I thought they didn't come out during, you know, when there's light around, but I guess there wasn't enough light. And yeah, we attracted the attention of the guard. But yeah, we're pretty much toast. But I guess this is as good a time as any to move on to the next game. But yeah, I think in this game it is actually worth it to turn on, except for the UI elements, but those aren't on the screen that frequently. So I guess it depends, but it does improve the motion fluidity for sure. Anyway though, let's check out Forza Horizon 5. I didn't even know this game had frame generation, but I guess I must have added it in. So we're looking at 1440p here. We've enabled full screen, and I've enabled DLAA for anti-aliasing, and that's it. We have super resolution off and frame generation off. Okay, and then graphics, I've set it to the extreme preset. Now this game is extremely well optimized. So yeah, we're getting some really solid performance to begin with. We could easily do 4K here, no problem. But let's try enabling frame generation and see how it works here actually, because this game is kind of fast paced, you know. You're moving around very fast. So let's see how frame generation works. We'll go to video and then enable frame generation to on. Reflex is on, it has to be, and save. Yeah, so it looks like we're getting 175, and it looks like it's capping it to my monitor's refresh rate. So it could definitely do more, you could tell, because it's pinned almost at 175, which is fine. I mean, that's plenty of FPS. I mean, this looks extremely smooth. The only problem that stands out is essentially you can see the rear of the car. It's ghosting really badly because of frame generation, and it's essentially all around the car, the shadow as well. It's doing it, but other than that, I mean, if you were to drive in the interior view mode, it wouldn't even be an issue. Let's do the good old quick panning around with the camera, and yeah, I mean, it feels actually pretty good. There's no way to really like smoothly keep it at the same pace in this game because you kind of got to twirl around the joystick to pan the camera around like this. But other than the ghosting in the car, it actually works pretty well. So not bad. I kind of wish I had a weaker RTX GPU to try it, because this game is so well optimized that the 3080 Ti crushes it. As a matter of fact, I just thought of something I want to try before we move on to the next game. So what I wanted to do, since I'm using an ultra-wide monitor anyway, was increase the resolution so that we put more of a load on the GPU so that we can begin with a lower base frame rate at around 60. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to set it to 4K ultra-wide. So 5160 by 2160. Regular 4K is 8.3 million pixels, and this is 12.7 million pixels. So it's essentially 150% of 4K. So much more of a load this time around. The graphical preset is still same, extreme. So we are sitting at around 60 to 70 FPS. So yeah, let's try turning frame generation on and see if anything stands out, anything out of the ordinary. We're gonna go to video and frame generation to on. Save settings. Oh, look at that. Look at the rear of the car. It seems like there's, yeah, the frame generation seems to be causing a bit of major ghosting, guys. Now, to be fair, DLAA will actually cause ghosting in this game. Obviously not like this. As a matter of fact, it's not even visible with some cars, but it is visible with some. Actually, I did a video like a year ago, I think, pointing it out that DLAA will cause that. Yeah, the ghosting is noticeably worse this time around, and maybe it's because we're starting from a lower base frame rate, but why don't we turn frame generation off? And I want to give my thoughts on what I think is also happening here. Okay, so frame generation is off now, and as you can see, there's no more ghosting, obviously, but I also noticed that the frame rate is not really where it should be with frame generation on. We didn't see that huge jump that we did earlier when we were running the game at 1440p. And my theory around this is that I think we could be hitting a VRAM limitation. And I say this because there was a part back then when we turned frame generation on that allocation went to 11.9, right? So that would explain why we're not getting that huge jump in performance, frame rate, and also why it's inconsistent as well compared to how it was at 1440p. And it makes sense. I mean, we're running the game at 150% of 4K, right? So that is a huge increase in pixels. But yeah, that's it for this game though. Let's move on to the next and final game. And the next game we're going to take a look at is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. One of my favorite 3D platformers that unfortunately wasn't very profitable for Sony according to the Insomniac leaks. So that sucks, but we're running the game at 1440p. We've disabled DLSS and we've maxed out all the graphical settings, including ray trace, reflection, shadows, and ambient occlusion to very high. And I do recall getting very good performance here with the 3080 Ti. And yeah, we're getting around 80 to 90 FPS. I did actually run into some VRAM issues with this game at 4K. But we're gonna take a look at 1440p here for now. And yeah, we seem to be getting pretty solid performance here at 1440p. And we'll check out how frame generation works, if there's going to be any garbling of assets, or especially the UI elements, which seem to have an issue with this mod in pretty much all the games that we've looked at so far. But for now, natively we seem to be getting solid performance. I would totally play the game like this, no problem. But will frame generation benefit us here? And that's what we're going to take a look at right now. Let's try turning frame generation on and see what happens. So there we go, frame generation on. Now this game is kind of VRAM intensive, and frame generation does increase the demand on VRAM, as we very well know. Okay, so we seem to be in the hundreds of FPS. Let's reset the 1% low counter. Let's get rid of these guys here. Throw some grenades. Alright, so we seem to be in the 90s. Not the greatest 1% lows, but it's alright, I guess. Okay, so far so good. The UI assets, as you can see, they're not good. There's a lot of smearing and garbling around of assets. UI assets, that is. So if you look at the ammo counter and the reticle, yeah, it's not great. The 1% lows aren't great either. Now, one thing I do remember playing around with this game was that messing around with DLSS and stuff like that would impact VRAM, actually. So resetting the game would kind of fix that. But I would say right now it's okay. We'll try resetting the game just to kind of make sure that everything works okay. Let's try resetting the game. Alright, so I've reset the game here. And yeah, we're starting to see some issues now. I'm not sure if it's coming through on YouTube, but just moving the camera around is just a lot of like screen, I guess, garble. I don't know how to explain it, but it's not good. It's like the frames are out of sync with one another. It's very strange. It's not like screen... It is like screen tearing, but not horizontally, more like vertically. You know? Which is strange, because prior to resetting the game, it wasn't running like this. So it just goes to show that, you know, these early mods probably have issues and they don't work the same or consistently with every game, right? Because we didn't actually... I didn't see this in the previous game that we looked at. So this is kind of strange. And the fact that it's happening after restarting the game. What if we just disable frame generation now? So yeah, it's kind of a hit or miss from what I'm noticing so far. I did try to mod it into Alan Wake actually, but it wasn't working. Frame generation was still grayed out. So I'm not sure what's happening with that, but I'm sure the modding scene will progress as time goes on, and you know, modders mess around and figure things out. So this is just kind of like an initial look, but we seem to be getting the same performance we were getting natively with 1440p here. So yeah, I would say Ratchet and Clank, probably not really worth using it in its current form anyway, just based off my experience looking at it right now. So I didn't spend a ton of time with it, but just a brief look at it. It seems to be kind of hit or miss. At first it seemed to be working okay for us, and as a matter of fact, let's try turning it back on, see if it clears up. There we go. Frame generation is on. And yeah, I'm not getting that screen tearing now. So that's strange. Very strange. I actually wanted to add this part in editing, since I'm looking at it more closely now, is that I think here now we could also be hitting some VRAM limitations. And I say that because not only is the VRAM allocations really high, but we're essentially getting the same FPS we were getting without frame generation enabled. At first we went to the hundreds, but now went back to 70. So yeah, it is, we know that VRAM is more intensive with frame generation on, and this is an already VRAM intensive game. And another thing is that sometimes you have to restart the game with this one. If you fiddle around with the DLSS settings or turn ray tracing off and on, it's like the VRAM buffer doesn't reset until you restart the game, which is why I restarted the game to see what would happen. So yeah, I think this one is a pass for me personally. Okay, so to wrap things up then, speaking of which, I did try Cyberpunk as well, and I wasn't able to get it running. For some reason, frame generation was still grayed out. But, I mean, I am getting close to 50 FPS with the 3080 Ti at 1440p native, with ray tracing maxed out. It's on Psycho. No path tracing, but the ray tracing is maxed out. The game looks great. I could easily turn DLSS set to quality and have a 60 FPS experience. No problem. So, it's not like I must have the frame generation to be able to play the game in this particular case, but it is nice and it's cool to see modders do their thing, and we get these mods for free for the most part, unless you want to support the modders. That's great. But then again, Cyberpunk is supposed to get FSR 3 integrated by the developers natively. I don't know when that is, but it was on the list of games, so that is cool. But my thoughts on the mod: yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. Is it worth it though? I don't think I would bother with it, to be honest with you. Just the fact that you have to modify the registry, and then you also risk the chance of maybe getting banned in online games. You know, I just personally don't think it's worth it seeing what I've seen with these few games that I tested. There's a lot of potential there, of course, but it's rather inconsistent in the execution as far as the game. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I did enjoy making this. I was kind of curious what my experience would be with this mod, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a like, and if you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe. You know the drill. But either way, I do appreciate you watching the video, and thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye-bye.